Hello, everybody. Jonathan Weibel here with another episode of Politics and Jonathan. And first, I am sorry for taking a longer stretch of absence than I anticipated. I've been incredibly busy with college and my internship. I'm mentoring at a law firm. It's been quite the enjoyable experience so far. But I'm back today with another episode. And today we are going to be covering not the 2008 Senate election in Alaska, though that is quite important to what we are talking about today. So, first off, I want to talk about the 2008 Senate election in Alaska with Mark Bates and Ted Stevens. So, as you know, Ted Stevens had a scandal because at first, if we go back here, he won with 78% of the vote, and he was incredibly popular, had been in office since I think 1968. Yeah, 1968. And he was not expected to lose re election even in this upcoming Democratic wave. And as it shows here, his conviction um, that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for his specific conviction. Let's see. Trial, conviction, reversal. 7 counts of failing to properly report gifts. But it turns out there was some very suspicious stuff when it came to overall how the charges were laid out, and some information was withheld from what I remember. Because as it shows here, his convictions were set aside, and the U.S. Attorney General dropped all charges against him. And take in mind, the U.S. Attorney General was a Democrat at this point, but he ended up losing to Mark Bates, who was the mayor of Anchorage from 2003 to 2009, and he ended up losing that by about 1.25. Based off the polls here, yeah, it seemed like he was sort of done for. And now we're going to the no, not 2002, 2014 Senate election in Alaska. Mark Bates was running again for re-election, and as him showing through beating Ted Stevens, he was quite the strong electoral candidate. Of course, Ted Stevens had that scandal, and more than likely he wouldn't have gone down without it, but it still is impressive Mark Bates was able to take him down with that scandal in tow, with how impressive of margins Ted Stevens had ran up and passed elections. And Dan Sullivan, I believe, was the Attorney General of Alaska, Assistant Secretary of State, Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Natural Resources. So he's definitely had some experience. And this election, at least I believe, due to the polls at the time. Oh yeah, Joe Miller was also here. I sort of forgot about that. Um yeah, it looked like he was going to win. It didn't get that way until September. Mark Bates was doing pretty well, and then the Republicans started to get a lot of momentum down the stretch because this was a Republican wave if it was any year. And, besides from like 1994. And overall, he ended up winning by 2.13. Still a very close and very heated race, but he was able to overcome Mark Bates, a very strong electoral candidate. And then in 2020, Dan Sullivan ran against Al Gross, who was the independent candidate. He was a orthopedic surgeon and commercial fisherman, and at first, he was also seen as a dark horse. It seemed like he may be able to get away with it, seen by some of these later polls, but then Sullivan was able to solidify his support, and also Republicans were massively underestimated in 2020, so that's what led him to win by 12 points. He actually did about a point and a half better than Trump did in Alaska, so he is an electoral overperformer, even against an independent. And now we go to 2026 with Dan Sullivan running for a third term against Mary Peltola. And if you all do not know who Mary Peltola is, she is the former representative from Alaska's at-large congressional district from 2022 to 2025, and she was a moderate blue dog Democrat in the area. That she differs from the Democratic Party as a whole is her gun policy. She is a lot more pro-gun than most Democrats are, and in terms of some economic values, he is more conservative based. And she was a pretty strong candidate. She won against Sarah Palin for the first round for the special election a few months before the general by about 3 points, and then she won in the general by about 10 points. But you also have to factor in a couple of things. Sarah Palin was an incredibly weak candidate who did not run a good campaign, and the ranked choice voting was very confusing for Alaskans at the time. At least that's what I've heard from a multitude of Alaskans, and more than likely, Sarah Palin probably would have done better if that confusing system was not implemented. But I still believe that Mary Botola would have won either way because I can't argue with a 10-point defeat. And Mary Botola ran again for re-election in 2024. She lost by about 2.5 points to Nick Bates, and now she's running against Dan Sullivan. And there are definitely a couple of things we really need to keep in mind when it comes to this race. Is that first, Alaska has not voted for a Democrat for president since 64, and Botola is the only Democrat to have won a statewide election in Alaska since Mark Bates in 2008. Alaska is a traditional Republican state. It hasn't always been incredibly solid Republican, but Alaska has always been there for the Republicans, besides from one specific election. And they have not had too many Democratic senators. The last one for Mark Bates, I believe, was. Trying to remember his name. He ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel is his name. He was senator from 69 to 81. He was primaried. Then Clark Grewing, who primaried him, lost by about 8 points, I think. But a lot of people think that Maria Botola will win this race because they point to the fact of Dan Sullivan. They see Dan Sullivan as a bit of a weaker candidate, but I think with all that I've laid out here, specifically his impressive electoral wins, I don't think he's a weak candidate, and he doesn't have any scandal that's dragging him down. His approval rating, at least what has been shown, hasn't been shown to be the greatest, but quite often approval ratings are a bit wonky, specifically at this time, and some of them, if they're not from more of the reputable pollsters, we need to keep them with a bit, we need to look at it from a bit more of a grain of salt perspective. I do think at this point Dan Sullivan's definitely favored. I don't understand the immense hype that Mary Botola has behind the Democratic Party. I simply do not believe that her winning in a Trump plus 13 state is realistic, with the senator A, not having any massive scandals, and B, being an electoral overperformer. They're both electoral performers, but I think you can understand the point that I'm really trying to get at here. Do I think this race will be close? Yes. Do I think it can be under 5? Yes. Though, I think as of right now, I'd probably put it in the around 5 to 10% race, somewhere in there. It's probably leaning more like 5-6%. Could potentially go under if Peltola runs a good campaign, but I don't think Sullivan is going down. Anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed this video, and please let me know down in the comment section down below who you believe will win this race. Don't think there's anything else I have to add. I really hope I'm able to upload some more of these videos soon. I really enjoy doing these, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.